Section 1. The Discovery. October 16, 1962. The White House, Washington, D.C., 8:45 a.m. The morning is quiet. Too quiet for a capital that commands half the world. Rain taps softly against the tall windows of the White House cabinet room. The air smells faintly of coffee and cigarette smoke. A leather folder lies open on the polished table, its contents face down, as if even the paper itself is afraid of what it contains. President Mustar. John Fitzgerald Kennedy has not yet arrived. Around the table sit men who have already seen the photographs. They do not speak. At the far end of the room, McGeorge Bundy, the president's national security advisor, stands rigid, one hand resting on the back of a chair. His eyes flick toward the door every few seconds. Bundy has delivered bad news before. Berlin, Laos, Vietnam. But never anything like this. The door opens. Kennedy steps in briskly, jacket unbuttoned, hair slightly damp from the rain. He looks relaxed, almost casual, as if this were just another briefing among many. He offers a brief nod to the room. "Good morning, gentlemen." No one smiles back. Bundy clears his throat. "Mr. President, we have a serious problem." He slides the photographs across the table. Black and white images. Grainy. Taken from 72,000 feet above Cuba. By a Lockheed U-2 reconnaissance aircraft flying out of Afghan's McCoy Air Force Base, Florida, just 2 days earlier. October 14th, raw. Kennedy leans forward. At first, he sees lines. Shapes. Construction equipment. Long cylindrical objects laid out beside concrete frames. Then he understands what he's looking at. And the room seems to contract around him. They are Soviet R-12 medium-range ballistic missiles. MEMA, NATO designation. SS-4 Sandal, each one capable of carrying a nuclear warhead with a yield far greater than the bomb that destroyed Hiroshima. Range, over 2,000 kilometers. From Cuba, they can reach Washington, D.C., New York, Chicago, Houston. Flight time, less than 15 minutes. Kennedy does not speak for several seconds. Finally, quietly, how long before they're operational? A voice answers from across the table. General Maxwell Taylor, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. 7 to 10 days, sir, possibly sooner. The president exhales slowly through his nose. The Cold War has just changed shape. 2 days earlier. October 14th, 1962. The danger had still been invisible. High above the Caribbean, the U-2 pilot, his name classified, his face hidden behind a pressurized helmet, guides his aircraft along a predetermined flight path over western Cuba. Below him, the island is lush and deceptively peaceful. Sugar fields, palm trees, winding dirt roads. The pilot does not know what he is looking for, only that Washington has ordered intensified reconnaissance after months of uneasy intelligence reports. The U-2's camera system clicks rhythmically, frame after frame, capturing everything below in merciless detail. When the aircraft lands back in Florida, analysts at the National Photographic Interpretation Centers in Washington begin the painstaking work of enlarging and studying the images. Late that night, Arthur Lundahl, the center's director, leans closer to a light table. He has spent his career examining Soviet military installations. He knows their patterns, their habits. What he sees makes his blood run cold. Missile launch pads, fuel trailers, support vehicles, tents laid out in precise Soviet fashion. This is not defensive. This is a strike force. By dawn on the 16th, the photographs are in Bundy's hands. By mid-morning, they are on the president's desk. And by noon, the United States of America is closer to nuclear war than it has ever been. The meeting that follows is hastily assembled and deliberately secret. Kennedy orders that no one outside the room be informed. Not Congress, not the press, not even most of the cabinet. He creates a special advisory group, soon to be known by its clipped acronym, ExComm, the Executive Committee of the National Security Council. Its members file in throughout the day. Robert McNamara, Mainhor Secretary of Defense, precise and analytical, already running numbers in his head. Dean Rusk, Secretary of State, cautious, soft-spoken, with the gravity of a man who understands diplomacy as a fragile art. General Curtis LeMay, Chief of Staff of the U.S. Air Force. Jaw set hard, eyes burning with barely concealed impatience. They take their seats. Maps of the Caribbean are unrolled across the table. Red circles mark known missile sites. Blue arrows indicate potential flight paths to American cities. The discussion begins immediately and brutally. LeMay speaks first. Mr. President, this is a clear act of aggression. The Soviets have changed the strategic balance. We must respond with force immediately. What kind of force? Kennedy asks. LeMay does not hesitate. A full-scale airstrike to take out the missile sites, followed by an invasion of Cuba if necessary. Several heads nod around the table. McNamara interjects. An airstrike won't guarantee we get them all. If even one missile survives, LeMay cuts him off. Then we follow through. Kennedy raises a hand, stopping the exchange. He knows what LeMay is really saying. War, not just with Cuba, with the PAC Soviet Union. And the president knows something else. Something only a handful of men in the room truly understand. The United States does not have a monopoly on nuclear weapons anymore. In Moscow, far from the rain-soaked calm of Washington, Nikita Khrushchev, first secretary of the Communist Party, believes he has made a bold, necessary move. To him, the missiles in Cuba are not an act of madness, but of balance. For years, American Jupiter nuclear missiles on Avlaoistas have been stationed in Turkey and Italy. Pointed directly at the Soviet heartland, American bombers regularly probe Soviet airspace. U.S. naval forces encircle communist allies. Khrushchev feels humiliated, vulnerable. Cuba, newly communist under Fidel Castro, offers an opportunity, a way to protect a revolutionary ally, a way to force the Americans to feel what it is like to live under the shadow of annihilation. The missiles are deployed in secrecy. Soviet troops wear Cuban uniforms. Equipment moves only at night. Moscow assumes, hopes, that Washington will not notice until it is too late. But hope is not a strategy. And now, the Americans know. Back in Washington, XCOM reconvenes again and again over the next several days. The options are laid out like weapons on a table. Do nothing and accept the missiles. Negotiate quietly, risking political humiliation. Launch airstrikes, risking Soviet retaliation. Invade Cuba, risking global war. Each choice carries consequences measured not in territory or prestige, but in millions of lives. Kennedy listens more than he speaks. He remembers. April 1961. The Mastonesty, Bay of Pigs invasion. The disastrous CIA-backed attempt to overthrow Castro. He had approved it. It had failed. The humiliation still burns. He will not be rushed again. On October 18th, Kennedy meets with Soviet Foreign Minister Andrei Gromyko in the Oval Office. Gromyko speaks calmly, confidently. The Soviet Union, he assures the president, is providing Cuba only with defensive weapons. Kennedy nods politely. He does not reveal that he has seen the photographs. The lie hangs between them, heavy and unmistakable. By October 20th, Kennedy makes his decision. Not an airstrike, not an invasion, a naval quarantine. The word is chosen carefully. Not a blockade, because a blockade is an act of war. American warships will encircle Cuba. Soviet vessels carrying military equipment will be stopped and searched. No missiles will be allowed through. It is a move designed to apply pressure without triggering immediate catastrophe. But it is also a gamble. If a Soviet ship refuses to stop, if an American captain fires a warning shot, if Moscow orders its navy to push through, the chain reaction could be unstoppable. That night, Kennedy rehearses the speech he will deliver to the nation. He knows that once the world hears his words, there will be no turning back. The clock is ticking, and somewhere in the Atlantic, Soviet ships are already moving toward the line. Section 2. The line is drawn. October 22nd, 1962. The Oval Office, the White House. 7 p.m. The red light on the television camera flickers on. For a brief moment, there is only silence. President John Fitzgerald Kennedy sits behind the resolute desk, shoulders squared, hands resting flat on the polished wood. His face is pale but controlled, the expression of a man who knows that every word he is about to speak will ripple outward across the planet. Behind the camera, aides stand motionless. No one breathes loudly, no one moves. Across the United States and far beyond it, millions of people lean closer to their screens. Kennedy looks directly into the lens. Good evening, my fellow citizens. As he speaks, his voice is steady, almost calm. But the message is anything but. He reveals the truth. Offensive nuclear missiles in Cuba. A direct threat to the Western Hemisphere. An unacceptable danger. Then he announces the decision. A strict naval quarantine around Cuba. Any ship carrying offensive weapons will be turned back. Kennedy pauses, just long enough for the words to sink in. It shall be the policy of this nation, he continues, to regard any nuclear missile launched from Cuba against any nation in the Western Hemisphere as an attack by the Soviet Union on the United States, requiring a full retaliatory response upon the Soviet Union. The implication is unmistakable. Nuclear war. When the broadcast ends, the world is no longer guessing. The crisis is real, and the clock is now visible to everyone. A year. In living rooms across America, families sit frozen. Some stare at the screen in disbelief. Others reach instinctively for their children. Radios crackle in kitchens, factories, and military bases. In New York, traffic slows as drivers pull over to listen. In Kansas, farmers stop mid-harvest, hats in hand. In Berlin, London, Paris, Tokyo, the news spreads in urgent whispers. People begin to ask questions no one ever wanted to ask out loud. Where would the bombs fall? Would there be time to escape? Would anyone survive? Aber. At the Pentagon, the mood is clinical and electric. The U.S. military shifts into higher readiness. Bombers are dispersed to reduce vulnerability. Crews sleep beside their aircraft. B-52, stratofortresses, each armed with thermonuclear weapons, sit on runways with engines idling, ready to take off at a moment's notice. Deep underground, missile crews move to their silos. Keys are checked, codes verified, procedures rehearsed. This is not an exercise. Move. Out at sea, the quarantine line begins to take shape. American warships, destroyers, cruisers, aircraft carriers, fan out across the Atlantic, approaches to Cuba. Their orders are precise and terrifyingly narrow. Stop Soviet ships. Board them if necessary. Use force only if absolutely required. The captains know what that means. A warning shot fired across the bow of a Soviet freighter could be the first gunshot of Borkan. World War III to D or Witkadiro then. Sonar pings echo through the water. Radar screens glow softly in darkened combat information centers. Sailors move with deliberate care, hands steady, voices low. Every blip on the screen is watched. Horror. In Moscow, the reaction is swift and furious. Khrushchev listens to Kennedy's speech through translators, his face tightening with every sentence. When it ends, he slams his fist on the table. This is madness, he snaps. To him, the quarantine is not restraint. It is provocation. An illegal act. An insult. Soviet media denounces the move as American imperialism. Diplomatic cables fly across continents. The Kremlin debates its response late into the night. Some argue for confrontation, others urge caution. Khrushchev knows the stakes. If Soviet ships turn back, he appears weak, both to the Americans and to hardliners within his own government. If they push through, the risk is incalculable. And somewhere in the Atlantic, Soviet captains are already sailing toward the line. October 24th, 1962. The Atlantic Ocean, Dawn. The quarantine officially begins. American destroyers take up their positions, cutting clean lines across the sea. The ocean is gray and restless, the sky heavy with low clouds. On the bridges of U.S. ships, officers scan the horizon through binoculars. Orders are repeated quietly. Weapons are manned, but not aimed. Then the reports come in. Soviet vessels are approaching. Distance closes mile by mile. Tension tightens with every passing minute. In Washington, Kennedy is informed in real time. Updates are brought into the Oval Office on small slips of paper. He reads each one carefully, then folds it and sets it aside. No outbursts, no dramatics, only silence. At 10:25 a.m., word arrives. The Soviet ships have slowed. Minutes later, they have a changed course. They are turning back. A collective exhale moves through the White House, the Pentagon, and NATO headquarters across the Atlantic. The first test is passed, but no one celebrates, because the missiles in Cuba are still there. Behind the scenes, another battle is unfolding, one fought with words instead of weapons. Messages pass secretly between Washington and Moscow, some formal, others personal. Khrushchev writes long, emotional letters to Kennedy, warning of catastrophe, appealing to reason, framing the crisis as a shared responsibility. Kennedy reads them carefully. He knows the tone matters as much as the content. The president's brother, Attorney General Robert Kennedy, becomes a crucial intermediary. Late at night, he meets with Soviet Ambassador Anatoly Dobrinin. In quiet, unmarked rooms, the conversations are tense, sometimes raw. There are moments when voices rise, moments when both men fall silent, aware that history is pressing in from all sides. Still, nothing is resolved. Meanwhile, in Cuba, the situation grows more dangerous by the hour. Soviet missile crews continue their work. Launch sites are camouflaged. Warheads are moved closer to operational readiness. Anti-aircraft batteries are manned around the island. Cuban leader Fidel Castro believes an invasion is imminent. He urges Khrushchev to consider striking first if the Americans attack. The message alarms Moscow. The missiles were meant to deter, not to trigger apocalypse. On a Ferdstard, October 27th. Dear Ferdstard, the crisis reaches its most perilous point. An American U-2 reconnaissance plane is shot down over Cuba. The pilot, Major Rudolph Anderson, is killed. In Washington, the news hits like a hammer blow. The Joint Chiefs immediately press for retaliation, airstrikes, invasion, decisive action. LeMay is blunt. We're running out of time. Kennedy knows he is standing at the edge of a cliff. Respond too forcefully, and the Soviets may launch. Do nothing, and he risks losing control entirely. That night, as the world sleeps uneasily, Kennedy drafts a response to Khrushchev. It is measured, careful, desperate, a proposal that could end the crisis or expose American weakness. By dawn, the fate of the world will hinge on how it is received. Section 3. The Final Hours. October 27, 1962. The White House, Washington, D.C. Late night. The Oval Office is lit long past midnight. A single desk lamp casts a tight circle of light over scattered papers, handwritten notes, and drafts marked with heavy pencil strokes. Outside, Pennsylvania Avenue is nearly empty, its streetlights glowing through the rain-streaked windows like distant beacons. President John F. Kennedy sits alone. His jacket is off now, his tie loosened. The calm composure seen on television has given way to something quieter, more human. Fatigue lines his face. His eyes move slowly across the page in front of him. A response to Nikita Khrushchev. Every sentence feels like a wire stretched too tight. Only hours earlier, the news had arrived. Major Rudolph Anderson, U.S. Air Force, shot down over Cuba. Dead. The first American combat casualty of the crisis. The Joint Chiefs had erupted in anger. This changes everything, General LeMay had said flatly. They fired on us. We must respond. Airstrikes, invasion plans, timetables measured in hours. Kennedy had listened, then dismissed the room. Now, alone with his thoughts, he knows the truth. If he retaliates, Khrushchev may retaliate in turn. If Khrushchev retaliates, NATO responds. If NATO responds, the missiles fly. And once they do, there is no recalling them. Across the Atlantic, in Moscow, Khrushchev is awake as well. The Soviet leader paces his office, thick eyebrows drawn tight. Telegrams spread across a long table. Reports from Cuba are troubling. Castro is furious. Soviet commanders on the ground are nervous. Some missiles are nearly operational. Khrushchev had wanted leverage. He had found himself staring into the abyss instead. Earlier that day, he had sent a long, emotional letter to Kennedy, almost rambling, appealing to shared humanity, to the responsibility of fathers, to the memory of war. But then, almost immediately after, a second message followed. Shorter, harder. This one demands a trade. Soviet missiles out of Cuba. American Jupiter missiles out of Turkey. The contradiction confuses Washington. Which message matters? Which Khrushchev is speaking? Back in the White House, Lyndon. Ex-com Janak reconvenes in tense fragments throughout the night. The president makes a crucial decision, one that will remain secret for decades. Publicly, he will respond only to the first Bahudusmau conciliatory letter. Privately, through back channels, he will accept the second bound demand. The Jupiter missiles in Turkey will be removed, quietly. Months later, without public acknowledgement. It is a compromise that saves face on both sides and risks Kennedy's political future if exposed. To deliver the message, Kennedy turns to the one man he trusts absolutely, his brother. October 27, 1962. Washington, D.C., evening. Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy steps into an unremarkable building near DuPont Circle. No press, no markings. Just a bare room and a table under dim light. Across from him sits Anatoly Dobrinin, the Soviet ambassador. The meeting is blunt, urgent, unrecorded. Robert Kennedy speaks carefully, his voice low. The United States will pledge not to invade Cuba. And the missiles must be removed, quickly, verifiably. And yes, there is another condition. Turkey. Dobrinin listens without interruption. He understands immediately how dangerous this conversation is. When he leaves, he goes straight to his secure line to Moscow. October 28, 1962. Moscow, morning. Khrushchev reads Dobrinin's message in silence. For a long moment, he says nothing. Then slowly he nods. The missiles will be withdrawn. He dictates his response personally, choosing words meant not for ideology, but for survival. He agrees to dismantle and remove the offensive weapons from Cuba under United Nations supervision. In return, the United States will lift the quarantine and publicly pledge not to invade the island. The message is transmitted. In Washington, it arrives just after breakfast. Kennedy reads the letter twice. Then he leans back in his chair and closes his eyes. It is over. Within hours, Radio Moscow broadcasts Khrushchev's announcement to the world. American intelligence confirms movement at Cuban missile sites. Launchers are dismantled. Warheads are crated. Soviet ships begin carrying them back across the Atlantic. The U.S. Navy maintains the quarantine, watching every mile of ocean. Slowly, deliberately, the threat recedes. The world exhales. In cities across the globe, people return to routines that suddenly feel fragile and precious. Newspapers print headlines filled with cautious relief. Church bells ring in some places, not in celebration, but in gratitude. But beneath the relief lies something else, a quiet terror at how close it all came. In the weeks that follow, the crisis fades from the front pages, but not from memory. Kennedy orders the creation of a direct communications link between Washington and Moscow, the hotline, so future leaders can speak without delay or misinterpretation. Both superpowers begin to reconsider the logic of brinkmanship. The lesson is unspoken, but clear. Deterrence has limits. Miscalculation has consequences. And survival sometimes depends not on strength, but on restraint. But years later, historians will uncover how close the world truly came. They will learn about the Soviet submarine commanders near the quarantine line, one of whom nearly launched a nuclear torpedo. They will learn that some missiles in Cuba were already armed. They will learn that decisions made by a handful of men, often in isolation, often under crushing pressure, stood between humanity and annihilation. But on that October morning in 1962, none of that is yet known. Only this: for 13 days, the fate of the world balanced on a single decision. And for once, the decision was to step back.